Okay, so today we have John over here, who's applying for a UC transfer, and we had a chance a couple days ago to just via email have kind of a first rundown. Could you describe for me how my approach, or let's rephrase that. What were the things that you noticed I was being very critical of with your first draft through, and what did you try to focus on for today in terms of the drafts that you're presenting?
Yeah, I think there were a few things that I had to work on between the first draft and this. The notes you had given me included, let's see, the notes for the first question included taking out at least some of the EQ qualities of my first draft response.
Mm-hmm.
So the feedback was focused on making that first opening question as professional as possible. So really focusing on professional qualifications. Um, what are the things I've done in school and outside of school that prepared me to take on the course load I'm looking to do at UC?
Real quick, I feel like I'm when I was formatting, I might have chopped off the first part of your essay here at the top for how you've prepared your required. Could you check to see if I accidentally chop
Yeah,
something off, and let's reimplant it.
let's see.
So in the meanwhile, as you're doing that, overall, I feel like when I was reading your draft, and when I read a lot of drafts, I'd say maybe 95% of the drafts that I read, when it comes to transfer students, the old habits of high school style writing, where it's more about telling a narrative and a personal story, starting with a hook, that tends to actually detract from what I'm looking for in a transfer read. When I'm reading a transfer required essay, this first one here for UC transfers, I'm looking for as professional of a signal that I can get. And usually that's showcased through being very policeman report, is what I try to go with, which is who, what, when, where, why. I think the analogy that I gave you, John, was I use basketball analogies a lot, but if you are trying to try out for the Lakers, you're not going to tell me this poem about how you love basketball and how you fell in love with basketball. Instead, you're going to just tell me the hard stuff. Like, I started grinding in the G Leagues. I spent 2 years in EuroLeague doing this and getting these accolades. In the meanwhile, I have strength and conditioning I've been doing as a blah, blah, blah. So we're looking for, in transferred the requirement essay, how you've grinded out the skill sets, the knowledge, the experience, the EXP to prove to me that you are a hard worker, that you are capable of handling, as you mentioned, the rigors of a higher upper division university experience. So that should have been the goal here this time around. You're stripping away all the intro hooks and things like that. You're going straight into where are you, who are you, and how have you been grinding the EXP. So let's go ahead and read through this. Let's give it a go.
Great.
After spending nearly a decade in the trades, I returned to school at Seattle Central College in 2020 to pursue a professional certificate in programming. I kind of want to know what the in the trades is, so you don't have to give up too much personal information, but that's where I would expand a bit more. As a reader, immediately I'm curious, what does that mean? So be more specific there. In the summer of 2021, however, I decided to pursue a bachelor's degree in philosophy. I'd been introduced to the Oh, I've been in. I was. I had been. I'd been introduced the quarter prior to the field of philosophy of science, and in particular, the philosophy of the social sciences. For the first time, I saw the possibility of practically combining my interests in philosophy with my interests in labor advocacy. Not many unions have the budgets to hire ethicists, but some do have the budgets to hire researchers. Okay. You're laying the ground out of over the next 10, 15 years. Here's where I think I can fit a niche and apply my intellectual interests and merge my intellectual curiosities. Not bad, a much better start. As a result, I am pursuing a UC transfer where I will have the opportunity to, I think it's whereby. UC transfer is not a place, so it's not where, so it's whereby. I will have the opportunity to train with professional philosophers and researchers with interests in the philosophy of science and labor policy. It gets a little bit repetitive. I feel like you're scratching the surface constantly. It's the same sense of philosophy of science, philosophy of social sciences, labor policy, labor advocacy. So it's like the feeling I get is like it's butter that's spread a little too thin on bread. So you can condense all this together into just one point. I think the argument could be that you developed first an interest towards philosophy, and the question is why? Why did you want to develop the particular philosophy interest towards social sciences? Is it because you wanted to be able to go into more of a research type of occupation, whereby what did you want to do with that research? How did you realize that? How did you find? What about researching did you realize would be important or have a certain sense of utility that would help you to achieve some of the goals you want or some of the differences in the world you wanted to make an impact on? So I think you could be a lot sharper in this first paragraph and just come out with it nice and juicy, nice and concentrated. To prepare for this transition, so I like this. To prepare for this transition, I've completed these prerequisite. I've completed these prerequisite classes: symbolic logic, history of ancient and modern philosophy, and even completed an independent study in the philosophy of science. I wish you gave me more detail on that. I don't know what independent study entails. I improved on the critical thinking skills. I developed more of my critical thinking abilities to parse through the blah 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 of maybe some of the philosophical works you've seen of where they do dissertations on labor and human resources and capital. So there's a chance here where you can be, again, more specific and therefore show a higher level IQ. Also, it's not improve on the critical thinking. You have critical thinking skills. So I improved my critical thinking abilities to do what? So I think it's about being able to parse through denser amounts of higher level content, philosophical data, not data, I'd say philosophical, I guess, like, again, dissertations, theses, works, books. I've learned to read closely and attentively to ask relevant, clarifying questions. I think instead of saying, I've learned this, I think I'd like it better if you said, I've learned how significant it is that even the way you frame your question leads to a different set of perspectives and outcomes. And that in part is the trick and the challenge when it comes to something as soft as the social sciences and philosophy. That the argument is that science, at least at an till an undergraduate level, is much more concrete. You get definitive answers, right? You input certain chemical formulas, you then get outputs of certain types of reactions. Same thing mathematically. Obviously, when you go higher, it becomes the opposite because you get like Schrodinger's cat and all that other stuff. But when you're giving me this notion of I've learned to do this and learned to do this, it begs the question of whether you're just a machine that's just checkmarking boxes, or whether you've realized the intellectual reason behind how you want to sharpen some of these skill sets as you reach into higher levels of philosophical work. I'm talking a lot right now. Any questions at this point?
No, this is perfect.
Okay.
And please feel free to change anything on this document you see fit. I'm trying to take notes on my end, but if you want to plop stuff in the document, go for it.
Sure. To practice building valid, sound, rigorous arguments. Okay. Valid, sound, and rigorous is kind of repetitive. They're all the same. I think the type of, if you really think about what a philosopher does in a scholastic setting, they are suspecting things. They are then finding the best, most rigorous way to then find truth in things, or to at least anchor things down into verifiable logic structures. And so I think there's an opportunity here to just show a little bit more IQ of what does a philosopher do at a more technical level. And yes, they're making and building valid arguments, but what does that entail? I think that arguments that are at a higher level are obviously data-driven. So on the one hand, there's an interesting connection with how modern philosophy is kind of utilizing what's being super prevalent in almost every other industry today, which is data science. On the other hand, you have this particular theme towards the labor market. And so it's also understanding the fact that labor is no longer necessarily a domestic phenomenon. It's much more about global themes as well. I think, for example, like in China, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but in China, there's this phrase called 996. Have you ever heard of that before?
I have, yes.
Yeah.
You'll have to remind me about it though.
Sure. So 996 is nowadays a lot of companies in China and bosses in China expect their new employees to sign up for a 996 work contract. And what that essentially is you work from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. So it's a 12-hour work shift, and it's 6 days a week, hence 996. The Chinese youth there, the younger professionals there, I think the 20s to 30s age, are so, I guess, there's many factors that are involved in it, but I think 996 is one where they get burnt out and they have this counter revolution going on. A lot of the younger professionals are essentially boycotting work. And I think it's led to this super high rate. I think it's like 30% of people that age in China right now are unemployed. And so when we're thinking about philosophy, it's where do the boundaries of our data end and what do we have to account for? And it's learning how to scope that. And when you're framing a question, it's do we account for that? And how do we sharpen the question where we don't have an infinite amount of what ifs so that we can actually get to a point? Isn't like kind of the joke about philosophers is they say a lot, but they do nothing? Right? So how do you translate it into something that's more pragmatic and something that's more quantifiable so that you can ultimately achieve what you want it to achieve, which is influencing policy perhaps as you go more into legislation or perhaps pursue a law school degree later. Wish you good luck if that's the case. In addition, I've completed a long list of mathematics, statistics, and science classes to better familiarize myself with the methods of modern scientific research. I like that. I don't think it needs a separate paragraph. I think it would be awesome if you merge the two as you're taking these prerequisite courses to go through the history of labor market philosophies from the works of, dude, this is where you're going to call me out live, man. Is it like Kantianism? So there's Kant, Immanuel Kant, then is it Adam Smith? Oh, man, my undergrad years were way back then.
No, it's totally excusable. Immanuel Kant's a huge name in continental philosophy. Not best known for any writings, as far as I'm aware, on labor markets. But yes, Smith is a huge name in philosophy of economics, for sure.
I'm assuming like Marx, because that then leads to like the distribution of labor and organization of human capital. So then you go into like socialism.
Big name too.
There you go. So I'm assuming they have some type of like zinger phrases, like they're known for certain types of themes or certain types of concepts and insights. So if you're able to show me that roadmap of as you were taking these prerequisite classes, you develop that broader meta of the history that has led to the kind of thinkings to this point that has essentially manifested into the type of work experience, the labor force that we see today, and how that labor force is changing with modern influences, whether it's technology, the internet, globalization, populism movement, and how that's regressing. There's also the third industrial wave. Aren't we in like the fourth industrial revolution right now?
I don't know. I think it's sort of gimmicky when a lot of commentators talk about that. But yes, there are people who say things like that. You know, there was the Industrial Revolution, then the information revolution. You know, people throw terms like that out. Sure.
Got you. So if you're able to show me that you dabble in that area, and it's kind of like you go into a basketball game, and you're playing with NBA pros, and you go, let's do the roly poly. What the heck is you mean pick and roll? Right? So 3 and D. So there's jargon, right? There's a way of expressing things that can showcase to me just word efficiently that you are already at that meta. And you could showcase that by weaving it into how you're taking these prerequisite courses. Then you give me the contrast. As you're taking these prerequisite courses, you then start to see how that connects to these other areas of interest because you realize the significance of how philosophical research, social science research is leveraging these new areas and to kind of developing kind of the synergy between the two. So I think instead of separating the two paragraphs, it would be great if you just showcased how you're building the meta and how you're trying to connect that meta to modern trends and applications today. By the time I transfer these, would have completed up to math calculus 3, basic statistics, and physical anthropology. I developed a special interest. So I want to give you a quick little feedback. Actually, let me read the next sentence. I developed a special interest in the contemporary literature on theories of causation. There you go. Now you're getting in there. And in my spare time, I've been working through a number of online learning programs, including most recently a lecture series by Marianne Talbot. Talbot sounds really familiar to me, put out by Oxford University. I love this. I think learning education has now gone beyond the classroom, and it's all YouTube. And it's all about the independent learning that you do. I'd also suggest something like EDX. Have you ever heard of edx.org before?
No, I've never been there. What's that?
Yeah, so if you go to www.edx.org, you could check that out. In fact, let me try www.edx.org. And then let's say we do labor economics. So it's a bunch of universities that are offering free courses. So if you looked up labor economics, yeah, you could look up energy economics and policy. And it's free and it's instructor paced and it gives you a good sense of what you can do. So these are the kinds of learnings. So imagine if you took like 3-4 of these courses. Imagine the amount of IQ you can inject into your essay. Anyways, I really liked that you mentioned this. I think that's genuine. So here's what I wanted to say. Let's read this part again. In addition, I've completed a long list of mathematics, statistics, and science classes to better familiarize myself with the methods of modern scientific research. I think that's fine. By the time of my transfer, these will have included. I think this gets a little too much. So instead, I've completed a series of mathematics, statistics, and science classes, including calculus 3 and physical anthropology, to expand and familiarize myself with methods of modern scientific research that can later on translate to the type of questions that my area of inquiry imposes. Something like that would sound really good, huh? So then once you say that you've done that, this is a resume flex because you're saying, here's what I've done. You then always want to match a resume flex with an introspection. So you need an introspection after this. So what? After going through these courses, grinding them out, what did you realize? So perhaps that's where you say, as you've completed these courses, you developed a greater appreciation for the kind of quantifiable social science research that is being conducted in UC schools. Or something like that. Never end on a resume flex. It's just one of my hard rules. Never end on a resume flex. Always attach an introspection. The argument could have been that this is your introspection afterwards, but I feel like you're going... I developed a special interest in contemporary literature and theories of causation, and in spare time, I feel like you're just continuing on as opposed to addressing what was the result of taking these classes.
Yeah, totally.
So this could be a whole new line of thought. Not to say that it has to be a new paragraph. This summer, I had the opportunity to work as a research assistant at Purdue University. All right. While there, I gained experience working with our team's literature review. I strengthened my programming skills in R, writing scripts for regression testing. Awesome. Is that chai? Square tests and more basic data visualization.
I pronounced it chai for a long time. The professor I had corrected me and pronounced it kai. I'm not sure.
Got you. I'll go with the professor for now, Kai. I presented our findings to other research teams around the world. So I did tell you to strip away the EQ, but I think at the very end you do want to mention it's almost like you're facing the camera and you're facing them directly and you're summarizing all of this. I'm doing all of this as I continue to endeavor and strive to excel academically, gain as much experience as I can by being proactive, by searching the latest in modern research and resources or blah, blah, blah. I want you to come out and say that you have developed the confidence not to succeed at a UC transfer and when you transfer, but the confidence to be able to take on the challenges that an upper division UC blah, blah, blah would entail. I think if you brought it back to just being, facing the camera, doing it like that, I think that would be awesome at the end here. Man, that was a little messy, but that was my first take reading through your updated draft. Thoughts, questions?
No, there's a lot of material for me to work with there. I think the advice especially to pair every, what do you call it, resume flex with an introspection. I
Yes.
especially liked. That'll probably be one of the first things I'm checking for on my next rewrite.
Good, good, good. And again, I feel like you're giving me a list, which was what I wanted. And now I want to kind of pare that back a little and see if you can start weaving these lists together so it doesn't feel like I'm just going through a resume.
Yeah.
So it's a paradox.
Also, I'm glad you said it. I've been trying to avoid it a little bit, but I like getting into the weeds on these subjects. So that's also something I'm going to be paying a lot of attention to in my next rewrite, is adding those details about the classes, adding those details about my interests.
So ultimately, in sum, I think a transfer UC essay, I'm looking for, if you've watched my videos, you've got IQ, EQ, and then AQ, academic intelligence. And I realized after I've been talking with you and thinking about your case a bit, I realized I'm going to add a new one for my graduate students and transfer students. I'm looking for ProQ. So there are professional students, and then there are students that are not as professional. And I think the difference is that professional students are very just to the point. Here's what I've done. Here's how I've prepared. Here's the deeper insights that drive me today. Here's how I suspect in the next 10, 15 years, how the changing dynamics of the work that I want to do is going to need these kinds of skill sets. And I want to prepare for that. I've started to prepare for that. And that's why ultimately I want to transfer to a UC, because going to an upper division and completing my degree there gives me the resources in terms of research opportunities, professional networking and experiences, and higher elective concentrations, more specialized elective concentrations that can prepare me to be scholastically rigorous enough for my work to be, and then I get lost here, but hopefully that was helpful.
It is very much so. And it's a lot more what I'm used to writing in cover letters and resumes.
I think a cover letter would be awesome like that. I think if I got a cover letter today and they were like, here's what I've been grinding out. I've been in the G Leagues. I've been practicing my layups 1,000 a day. I have a bigger insight of where the meta is going to go, and I'm preparing for that. Even a cover letter would benefit from a lot of the ProQ type of style. Okay.
Yeah, I think so too. I think there's a lot of overlap there.
Let's move on to the next one. How do you feel about the draft for the Community a Better Place? Do you remember my feedback on that? Could you kind of walk me through what you were focusing on in the second draft here?
Yeah, of course. Here, let me pull it up for myself real quick.
Mm-hmm.
So the feedback I'd received on the first draft of this community question here was really the inverse of a lot of the feedback I got on the first,
right?
Which was that there was almost too much time spent in the first draft I had on resume flexes and not enough time spent on the introspections about my experiences and the lessons learned and the personal details of the volunteer work I had done.
So you try to focus more on EQing and introspecting this time around and maybe telling more of a personal narrative.
That was the idea, yeah.
Let's begin. What have you done to make your school or community a better place? I've always, by the way, I'm a little bit of a hard ass when it comes to something like this. Always want my students build a good habit of putting in the word count. So for the other ones, real quick, put in the latest word count. So we're at 489. It's a 350 limit for these essays. We're over. We're thinking about cutting maybe 1/4 of this. So I'm keeping that in mind as I read through. I've been heavily involved in volunteer work for most of my adult life. I like how simple that is. Let's see where you take it. Projects have ranged from working as an organizer with the blank and the blank to soup kitchens and outreach for the homeless. I worked as a SALT for the blank and volunteered my time with the blank. When teachers went on strike in Wisconsin, oh cool, Wisconsin, I went to help walk the picket lines and distribute food and water. Most recently, I volunteered to cook and deliver firewood to picket lines during the concrete workers strike in Seattle. So I love that you gave me that range. But now I'm hoping, please, are you going to zero in? Are you going to zero in on a particular area? Let's find out. When I could, I built houses in Louisiana for hurricane victims with the Catholic Community Services, and again for rural single mothers in the mountain of Costa Rica with Habitat for Humanity. And several times throughout my life, when I had the space, I'd even moved homeless people into my own home while trying to find themselves on their while they tried to get themselves on their feet. That's awesome. I'm actually cool with all that. Okay, let's keep going. The last people, me and my roommates and I invited.
Every time.
The last people, is it my roommates and me? No, because it's object. Object is me. Back to SAT tips, man. All right. So invited to stay were Melanie and Trevor. Melanie was pregnant. Trevor was trying to make some money selling jewelry in the street before their baby arrived. They lived in a tent under the freeway. That was really powerful to me. I love what you did there. Just the staccato in music where you're just giving me just these kinds of like poignant sentences. You're not trying to fluff it up. I love that. I liked a lot about them. Oh, great. Okay. They could be kind and open and welcoming. I think kind, open, and welcoming are kind of the same. All three are kind of synonymous in a way. So maybe some other descriptions of them. They were accepting of everyone. Same thing, right? Repetitive and upbeat in the face of hardships. So maybe the point about this is they were, despite their circumstances, right? And despite how I thought that they would feel with all that, with a baby coming on the way, all the pressures of that, they were still kind and opening. And they were upbeat. And that made me pause as to like, and this is where you get an introspective point. Like when I see people like those, it makes me pause on my own life. It makes me think about like all the little worries that I have. And it gives me a sense of like a new breath, kind of like a second wind in life of convictions and what matters, that clarity. But let's see where you go. But there was problems too. They would sometimes cook drugs in the kitchen while we were, oh my goodness, out of the house. They would often get high and fight, break up, and get back together again. It wasn't clear how they would be able to take care of their child once they were born. That's a very, very serious situation. Okay. Eventually, our lease ran out, and we all went our separate ways. I lost touch with Melanie and Trevor and never met their child. I would sometimes run into mutual acquaintances, but I would chance run into some mutual acquaintances and get updates. So I think there's a but statement where the contrast. Melanie left Trevor and traveled out of state with the child. Trevor, some years later, I met by chance while walking out of a grocery store. He had bags under his eyes. Okay, so the chance thing is here. That's good. I asked how he had been. He lit a cigarette and told me his friend had died in their tent the night before, a heroin overdose. I expressed my sympathy and asked if he needed anything. A few dollars if he had them. Sure. I gave him a cigarette and left it on the corner. That's the last time I saw him. That's so powerful. Damn, that's powerful. Melanie and Trevor. So, but at the same time, I'm wondering, like, you're literally, now you have to stick the landing, right? This is like an ice skater who did like the quadruple Lutz, and then I'm gripping my teeth. How the heck are you going to stick this landing to answer the prompt, right? The prompt is about what have you done to make your school a better place or a community a better place? Let's see what you do. Melanie and Trevor taught me just how complicated and difficult issues of homelessness are. Beautifully said. Mental health care, rehabilitation services, healthcare. You got healthcare twice. An enormous amount, because it's kind of repetitive. I know mental health care is not necessarily healthcare, but it's a little redundant. An enormous amount of resources and expertise will have to be brought to bear to make any substantial difference. It is not something individuals, no matter how well-intentioned, will be able to solve. It's one of my greatest motivators to study how and why public policy decisions can work, so that the necessary resources can be allocated correctly to help people like Melanie and Trevor in a way I couldn't alone. Wow. So I don't think this answers the prompt. I think from a mechanical level, okay, so here's what you want to do. You're looking at the subject of each of these sentences. And do you see how this first one's fine? It taught me as a humble point, but the rest of this, there's no I statement. So because you don't have I statements, it's harder to get a direct answer to the prompt. What have you done? Well, I don't feel like I've really helped that much. You can even admit that for Melanie and Trevor, I wonder if I've helped them at all at times. Perhaps. Maybe that could be like the conflict in your mind, but that compels you, that drives you to want to do more. I think it's because you're lacking I subjects in here. I'm not getting a conclusion of how you felt you've been helping your community to this point and why you want to continue to help them even more. You have the why you want to continue to help them even more here. I don't feel good about my feedback to you.
No, you're 100% right. And it totally, in the course of trying to tell the story, you're right. I went off the rails. I've answered the question of why I'm pursuing the academic course. I'm not answering the question, what have I done to help my community, or at least not in the conclusion I've offered. You're totally right.
Yeah. In truth, this has to me like themes of a potential Harvard essay. So I have this notion: you have the personal statement, you got the UCs, the typical essays you have to typically write, the essays you have to commonly write are why your major choice, why our college, and then there's this open-ended one. And for undergrad students, you guys would know it's Stanford's what matters to you and why, Yale, what's meaningful to you and why. Harvard has this open-ended essay, and I've seen from students who get accepted over the years, this has that kind of vibe where you are being open about social commentary and you're realizing something that holds you to a greater sense of accountability with your education, right? Parents want you to go to school because they want you to have a good job and be stable, right? But when you're trying to apply for Harvard or U Chicago, when you got that open-ended essay, you got to showcase that you're held to a higher calling in your life. And I think that is great here. So you've got a great essay, but the wrong prompt.
It's just the wrong place for it.
So
okay.
Let's try. Another thing is we just got way too much content. I love that you started off with the broad range of things you do. I do think you should sharpen it down. So it's like, here's all the stuff I've done, and and give me some introspection. Like, why did you do this? Is it because you were just naturally drawn to the desire to help? You found it personally gratifying, and it's just something that you learned from family and from observation, from going to church yourself or Catholic, blah, 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 blah. But out of all of these experiences, I think one in particular is what made me see how much more I can do. And that's when I met Melanie and Trevor. And then that creates this more of a sharper scoping in story of here. Once you do that, I think you should talk about what you did to try to help them. Okay? And what you learned. Like, I never brought in a homeless person or something like that into my home. So offering them bathing, shower, right, a place to sleep without feeling away from the elements and blah, 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 providing in that way. I think you need to showcase more what you did. Then a problem arises. So then when things get difficult, what did you learn? If I saw them cooking drugs in my kitchen, I would have kicked them out immediately, right? So did you have to?
Yeah, that was a stern conversation.
Okay, so learning how to have conversations with them in that way to set rules and boundaries, I think is kind of a microcosmic experience to maybe the grander community of how you have to try to. It's not just giving them shelter. What were you giving them? Were you giving them, on the one hand, you're giving them acceptance, forgiveness, in a sense that you're giving them a chance. And you realize that's important to them. But they're so, what led them to this place in the first place are these habits that became so ingrained that it became very difficult for them to get out of it, to the point that they would be, you would catch them still trying to cook up drugs in the kitchen. So in that sense, I think it's, instead of helping them with the physical needs, it's then giving them more guidance and counseling. So I'd be interested in what you did there. You don't have to go through all of this story. It's beautifully written, but I think focus on the beyond the element saving physical. What did you contribute? What did you offer? And then it's just come out sharply with it. Melanie, it's been 3 years, or it's been 2 years, and since Melanie and Trevor left my home, and the last I heard of them, Melanie has left with the kid, and I so happened to chance upon Trevor walking out of a grocery store, and he was still struggling with that. And I remember at the time, giving him a few dollars and um, giving him a cigarette to as I left him on the corner, um, and that was the last I saw of him. Uh, but that leaves you with this hole because clearly there's no solution. There hasn't been a resolution, at least for Trevor. That then leads you to one of the greatest motivators. Uh, that's how I would structure this essay.
So I'd like to keep it, but you're totally right that maybe it's that last paragraph is the one I cut. They didn't really ask me about that in the prompt. But then also it's not a nice way to leave it. I feel like it's a depressing note to leave it on if I just cut that last paragraph,
I agree. So even though it doesn't ask it, I guess in some, how did you help your community? You have a history of helping, but there's one in particular you want to point out, which is Melanie and Trevor, which is what has been kind of a foundational or like a critical experience, a key experience in what motivates you today. You manage to help them by offering your home, right? Getting as intimate of the way you help as you can, opening up your life to them, your home to them. And in some senses being betrayed by them, right? They are kind of breaking your trust, but the introspection of that is learning that the habits that got them there in the first place is extremely difficult to kick. And just trying to work with Melanie and Trevor and all the kind of flaws that they have, it showed you how community service is not like a punch card, a clock in and clock out at a soup kitchen necessarily. I think the things what interests me more now, because I see the importance of this or the growing relevance of this more now, is helping your community through counseling and being someone who, just as an ordinary community member, gives people the chance. It's extremely dangerous to do so too, I might say. So I wouldn't recommend the same thing you did for everyone.
Yeah, no.
And then it's how you dealt with not having a closed book, because ultimately it sounds like they left and Trevor's still kind of in a rut. I like the fact that that's left open-ended because it leaves you with more work to be done. When I talk to students, and this is for any student, not just transfer students, all students who are writing this prompt, the way that I try to guide them, the guiding stars for this is, what did you do? And I think you need to expand upon that. The second part is, what keeps you coming back to keep doing it? And I think your paragraph here, the last paragraph where I'm highlighting, starts to really answer that. Those are my thoughts about your essay here.
Okay, great.
Questions?
No, that gives me a lot. That gives me a lot to work with. That's a really great starting point for my next revision.
Okay, let's go to every person has a creative side, and it can be expressed in many ways. Describe how you express your creative side. What's the thing you try to focus on fixing or working on for this draft?
Yeah, let's pull that up. The biggest thing I worked on in this rewrite was trying to talk more about the nitty-gritty of my creative process.
Okay.
In working on scripts. So you'll see a lot more detail in this draft on that.
Got you. And that's coming from the prompt itself. Describe how you express your creative side. Just saying you play the violin or just saying you do fine arts or oil and acrylic painting doesn't mean you're creative. It's your approach to how you start to create a composition or formulate the subject matter or the content. The decisions you make as you put pen on paper or as you put the bow on the string. Let's see what you got here. Academic work is a deeply creative pursuit. That's how I see it. I love that. But I don't think it would make much sense to call most academic journal submissions works of art. Beyond the academic work that interests me, I also have a history in the arts. Okay, it's interesting. I like that. Film and theater have been a part of my life for a long time. My mom is a stage director and actress, and my dad is a film director and screenwriter. Can you describe to me the difference between a director and a screenwriter?
Yeah. So the director's responsible on set every day for the scheduling, for the order of the shoot, for making sure people show up on time, choosing the staff they're going to be working with, who, the casting director is going to be, who's going to be the cinematographer. I mean, it's done in collaboration with the producers, obviously, and other people, but those are the major responsibilities, and especially in directing all of these forces during the shooting. What are the lighting decisions we're going to make? What's going to be the tempo that the actors are following in the script? I'd like you to take greater pause after this line. I'd like you to put more emphasis on this moment in the exchange, things like that. Screenwriters just giving the story. It's the screenwriter's job to write a great script. That's it.
Okay, so what's interesting to me, and I'm assuming there's an overlap, like great directors could also have been themselves screenwriters for what they directed, but like I'm thinking of.
Yeah, definitely.
So I could see, forgive me for this, but like I know a lot of famous directors. You got obviously Steven Spielberg. My favorite is probably Quentin Tarantino. M. Night Shyamalan, though he hasn't really had that many hits yet. And it makes me wonder, like, we know a lot of famous directors, but we don't know a lot of famous screenwriters.
Yeah, unfortunately.
And so who is this?
Every once in a while you get a breakout. I think, like, the name Charlie Kaufman, probably, maybe not many people, but a lot of people in the public know Kaufman. He started as a screenwriter. He's later broken out as a director. But yeah, you're right. There are much fewer examples of that.
I see. So I'm thinking like a screenwriter gets less credit, but is in many ways the heavy lifting in terms of dialogue and setting this. Okay, yeah. Gotcha. Okay. My parents often brought me along with them backstage or on set for a shoot. I don't think or on set is necessary, just backstage for a shoot. So it's unnecessary detail loops. Just drop the detail loops. Left to wander the hallways of the tiny playhouses and empty buildings my parents worked in. So I'd probably want different descriptors here. I feel like tiny playhouses, they're sets, but like maybe give me descriptions of some of the sets that you were on and some of the incredible set structures and contraptions that were built. I think a little bit more texture here would be nice. I would sneak through the dressing rooms and hide behind the rows of fold-up chairs and watch rehearsals through the cracks, like that. Being with my parents as they brought their scripts to life never stopped being a romantic experience for me. That's beautifully said. And it is because of them that telling stories has remained such an enduring passion of mine. Love that. That is EQ, so pure, man. That is so angel, baby's bottom pure. Good job. Besides being an avid movie lover, many weeks I watch a new movie at least once a day. I still write screenplays when I'm not too busy with work or school. In fact, I'm currently working on a screenplay framed loosely on the structure of Alain Rena's 1980 film Mon Oncle. I'm not going to even attempt that. It's based on my time working the shipyards. I've even entered a number of short screenwriting competitions, most recently with NYC Midnight, where I've made it at least as far as the second round of judgments. You did that perfectly. I wish more students would do that for me as a first draft. It would give me less of a headache. So what I mean by that, you started with an EQ, a personal reason and conviction and interest, and then you just police reported it to me. here's what I do. I work on, I write screenplays. So now let me see if you go into what your influences are. It'd be lovely to, at this point in the next set, to see, are you a screenwriter that's this in style? Are you influenced by certain type of genres that then seep into what you do? And do you then have your own little twist to it because you're like very anti-hero involved or obsessed right now, or different kinds of themes? Let's see what you do. I enjoy writing late at night when the city has quieted down and I can get lost in the script. I often explore themes of loss in my writing. Interesting. I like that you're setting the scene. I'd sharpen this. I'd be like, the way I'd kind of phrase it is, when I start to write, where I get my creative inspiration is not a matter of where as much as it is a matter of when, right? It's late at night, and that's when all the sounds start to kind of quiet down, and I allow myself to get lost or immersed in my script. And it's in that solitude, the stillness where a pin needle can drop, that I gravitate towards writing themes about loss or something like that. I think I would phrase that like that. Anyways, I'm fascinated by the process of grieving and how we remember the people we've lost. So I would probably sharpen this. These two sentences can be put into one. I often explore themes of loss, particularly in the process of human grieving and how we remember the people we've lost in my writing. So I would combine these two sentences. Maybe you've had the experience, you broke the fourth wall. Is there a rule about breaking fourth wall in screenwritings? Actually, I guess not. I think you have Pulp Fiction. But in essay writing, this is usually, maybe it's a stuck-up notion, but it's usually a no-no. I'm not that hard on that rule because I've seen some really good being used. Maybe you've had the experience of your mind playing tricks on you, and for a split second thinking you saw your father in public, or just the feeling that your mother was right around the corner. You check. Nothing. Wow. You know what I'd do? I'd make this your intro.
Okay. All right.
What a hook. A lot of students are the problem that they make is for themselves is they focus too much on focusing on trying to say a good hook. But really, when you're writing the meat of your essay first, the hook just comes out naturally. But imagine if you started with a you statement like this. Your opening line was, maybe you had experience of your mind playing tricks on you, and for a split second, you saw your father in public, or just the feeling that your mother was right around the corner. You check. Nothing. I dropped the whole academic work completely. Okay, so I would delete this, right? And then I'd go into screenplay writing. As an aspiring screenplay writer who has dabbled in blah 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 and blah blah blah, I've been immersed in. I've been obsessed with writing about humanistic themes or like maybe you could tell me as a screenwriter, what's your intention? Are you trying to go explore deeper the emotions of human condition? And as of late, you've been really kind of in the theme of loss in people's lives. I think if you just started off as an aspiring screenplay writer in the second paragraph like that would be freaking awesome. Then you explain the context, like having a mom as a stage director and a father as a film director. Like it was natural for you to want to see all these things and eventually pair that together and turn this into an ardent passion of yours, despite the fact that you want to pursue philosophy and social science research, right? You often still find yourself looking for the dead of night when the city has quieted down so that you could get lost in writing your scripts. Oh, dude. And then you talk about what you've recently been working on, right? You give me some context. I've been doing some short screen competitions from New York City, blah, and blah, and blah. And more recently, I've been framing a new work of mine off of blah, 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 Elaine. So I'm kind of like rejumbling up your essay here. I think that order would be so good to read.
Yeah. I totally see what you're saying with that. I like that.
These are depressing moments. Or sorry, where was it? I enjoy writing late night and how I remember people's lives. These are depressing moments, but I like so. Sorry, I'm like mixing it up. Let me see what I could do with the rest. These are depressing moments, but I like using them to highlight. I like to use them to highlight our capacity for love. Damn, you're romantic? Okay.
I don't I don't know that in the strict sense I would refer to myself as a romantic, but yeah, there are a lot of romantic themes I, I I'm involved in.
Gotcha. Who's your inspiration for that as screenwriters? If you name dropped a couple of other prominent screenwriters, that's word for word the greatest way to showcase IQ. Pound for pound, great IQ signaling is knowing the greats that you follow, but also detract yourself from, or like veer away from. So it'd be nice if you mentioned like Capacity for Love that's explored by Rene Descartes and blah 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 and blah blah. But then you have your own twist to it. See, now I'm starting to see. Okay, so his creative process is influenced by this, but then he's found his own kind of little niche. Why do we hold on to the people onto these people so long after they've gone? What possible evolutionary advantage could be given by such a trait? You know what this is from? I know exactly what this is from. This is from Interstellar. The theme about love.
Yes,
Anne Hathaway.
I loved that movie.
Yeah.
That was a brilliant film. Yeah.
Yeah, despite being literally light years away, there's this inexplicable connection that draws her to the ball. Yeah, and it's love, right? It's unquantified.
Wasn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
I loved that movie.
I totally remember that scene. Okay, cool. I wonder who the screenwriter for that was. Was it Christopher Nolan who also took over that role?
That's a good question. I seriously doubt Christopher Nolan could write something like that. Interstellar.
Mystery of it also interests me. And it's not that it's also interesting you. You remember, you got to tell me you're a screenwriter. So it's not that it interests you, but it interests you in a way also that you're also intrigued by it, that you want to share it. You want to be able to convey it, and that's where you get the energy or the fuel to continue to write as a screenwriter, or to develop your craft, right? Cultivate your craft as a screenwriter. So you can add that to the screenwriter part at the end there. I think there's a connection too between the sort of themes I explore and the aesthetic choices I make. I like the slow, subtle something. I also write a blog where I keep fresh movies.
Yeah, you caught me hurrying to try and add a little something.
That's okay.
Right before a meeting, so this is where I taper out.
Got you. Yeah, you've got a really interesting story and background. I would say top 10% of my writing, or in my career, of like the topic choice, right? So now it just comes down to execution and flow. And so hopefully you can consider my idea of starting with the you off the bat. I think that's, like, in a way, in a good kind of shocking. It captures my attention. And then you backflow. You got to inject a little bit of your background of what got you into aspiring to be a screenwriter, your mood, your way of getting into the mood of screenwriting, what you're currently dabbling with, the themes, and how that's in contrast to some of the influences and motivations, the role models of screenwriting in your life, so to speak. And then today, why you continue to do it, because it's something that you see as you explore the connections of themes in your screenwriters and the characters that you develop or that you conjure. It also becomes a kind of an introspection and a reflection on your life. And in that way, it's something that also keeps you, I don't know. I fizzled out too. Thoughts, questions?
No, again, Jay, it's fantastic feedback. There's a lot to work with there.
Oh, I love this. Do a good job. I want this to be good.
I'm gonna try.
And then last but not least, you have prompt number 4, or I don't know if the number's correct. That's probably number 6, I think. The last essay prompt, whatever it is. So you weren't able to complete this. Did you have some questions you wanted to shoot my way? Maybe I could give you some pointers here.
Yeah, any pointers or advice on how to fill this section out? There's also I put at the end, if we have time to talk about it, that'd be great. If not, it's fine.
Okay.
But these last 2 questions, just wanted to brainstorm maybe a little bit about what would be good material for them.
Okay, so it's kind of like we were fighting battles with the essays. We're now thinking about the war, because we have 4 essays we're submitting. So what makes you a strong candidate? We've already addressed the pro Q, how you've prepared, have you grinded, got the EXP, got the skill sets. So we're not going to talk about strong candidate in that sense. We're also not going to talk about strong candidate in the sense of, I guess, community service and community values, because we got that in the other essay. We don't want to talk about strong candidate in the sense of major choice either, because I normally always recommend my students to go with the UC prompt where it says describe one of your favorite academic subjects, and that's maybe for freshman students. Disregard my last point. Sorry. In this case here, a strong candidate for a UC, I think the problem the problem that gets created is their initial assumption of the essay prompt, which is, I need to prove that I'm strong for UCs. I've often found that leads to poorer essay results. So instead, I think you should frame this as, what makes me unique? What makes me stand out, in the sense of what I can contribute to a community, not to a school necessarily. Because what UC's, I think the experience I had going to UCLA is that UCLA is really itself a microcosm of the greater world. They're trying to look for musicians, philosophers, scientists, ethicists, etc. So you know how there's like, when you're growing up, your mom thinks you're going to be amazing. You're going to be the president of the United States someday, or you're the main protagonist of your story. And as you grow older, hopefully you get humbled, and you realize that everyone has a role to play. There's so much knowledge in this world that you can't possibly be the master of everything. So you have to be an expert in something. So another way of thinking about it is, we want to go to the moon. But instead of saying, I want to go to the moon, you say, I want to be the geochemist who figures out the formula to create the rocket fuel that will get us sustainably to the moon and beyond. So there's a role you want to play. In a town, there's the baker, there's the protector, there's the vigilant watcher. So what's the role that you identify as? For my younger students who are into video games, there's like the tank, there's the healer, there's the damage dealer, right? There's roles in anything. And so if you could try to identify what your role is your role the communicator, right? Or I love the idea that as a welder, you learn some things, because there's obvious like things about welding that you can maybe parallel. As a welder, you're obviously bringing things together, but you can have some maybe niche knowledge about like tricks to welding that not often, like two types of metals don't connect, and you have to learn how to kind of assuage them. Maybe I'm getting a little Rings of Power, man. I was watching an episode of Rings of Power, and I think spoiler alert, but that the Sauron guy, he's like, maybe instead of forcing the metal together, we have to coax them together. Like, what's the difference? So maybe you could say, as a welder, you gain some insight into life that then then parallels kind of the character and the role you want to play for your community.
Okay. Yeah.
Thoughts?
Well, that's going to take some thinking to try and come up with a good categories to put myself in. I like the idea of using some sort of. I feel like I haven't talked too much about, even though it was such a big part of my life for so long, maybe over a decade. I was welding. I haven't really talked much about it. And maybe this would be a good place to talk about that a little bit.
Did you meet a lot of? Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, you're right. That was maybe that is pretty unique in the, I don't know, higher education. Is I actually wouldn't anticipate with a lot of the guys I used to work with that you get too much crossover between those worlds.
Did you meet a lot? So you said you've been working a long time. Did you meet a lot of people? Were they journeymen throughout life? Were they doing part-time jobs? Like, maybe you can also opine on the journey through life that you saw other people going through as a welder, because they're working to get their wages and earn a living. And maybe that gave you a greater insight into the collective or maybe a unifying drive that we all share, and how that then gives you this fuel to use your education in a way that's not self-serving, right? That becomes ultimately this like almost this negative cycle that the reason why I think I'll be a strong candidate for admissions to a UC is because I have a greater purpose with how I want to apply my education. That could also be a strong pull too.
Yeah, those are great ideas. I mean, I have tons of material I could pull from for
Cool,
sure. From
cool. I want to learn some cool stuff about welding, man. Give me some. So here's what I mean by that. Like a really good technique in movies. Um, what was the one with Brad Pitt and Fight Club? You know, you can make soap out of like human fat or something. You know, so that's a
totally,
bit
yeah,
more macabre, right? But like when a movie, when a TED talk, when something teaches you something new, like this niche knowledge, that's juicy. That's very very juicy. For example, I had a what is it called, the sport where you're swimming but water polo, derp.
yeah.
So one of my water polo students said this to me because I've never water poloed in my life. A lot of people think about water poloing as the passing, the blocking. But as a water polo player, the real battle happens under the water where there's the kicking and the scratching. And then, so that opened my eyes, and it felt rewarding to listen and learn about that. So as a welder, it's like, what's your kicking and scratching as a welder? Hopefully not negative, but then it also it also lends to the fact that as a welder, you've met a lot of people throughout your life, and in different points of their lives, right? And think of like a stop sign, a stoplight. You ever wonder, you're at a stoplight and you look over on the other side of the street and there's this person in the car and you see them, and it's like sometimes you wonder, like, where are they going? Where are they from? Like, what point in their life are they at? So you're at these crossroads as a welder for 10 years because you meet people along the way, these journeymen. And what kind of deeper insight does that teach you? Anyways, I got to move on to the last one.
Great.
This shouldn't be an essay, but rather a place to explain it unusual for. Okay, so what's your question about this?
Nothing. Should I use it? If I do use it, what should I use it for? What's your experience with this question?
So there's the excuses essay here. So if you had poor grades and you need to kind of explain the circumstances of how you had a semester or a quarter of bad grades, so use it as utility to shore some maybe academic gaps, as well as even experiential gaps. Perhaps you took 2 years off and you want to explain like what you did during those 2 years. You can also use this for a sob story. So maybe you're further fueled now today because you have an illness in the family that's just giving you this fervor and conviction. And you get sob story points for that. What else would I use it? Unusual personal family circumstance. Honestly, those are the two things that come to mind.
Okay. Well, yeah, I took over 10 years off.
Yeah, I think that requires accounting. I think that's a great place to put in here.
Okay.
So that becomes the war scale again. Like we're already talking about perhaps welding in the essay above. So 10 years of the welder may end up overlapping with this. So the argument could be that if you already established the ethos or the explanation of that in the essay above, then you don't really need to answer number 5. Another way of asking this question is, Jay, how many of your UC transfers who've successfully transferred, let's say to LA or Berkeley, et cetera, how many answered this part of the prompt? I'd probably say less than 50%. So it's by no means a necessary response. If the other 4 essays can showcase your growth and explain for the life circumstances, then I don't want to belabor the point or obviously be repetitive here.
Okay, so anything that answers those topics you just brought up and is not redundant belongs in this section.
Well, and very concise, yeah.
Okay, perfect.
All right, I think that covers it for now. Not too bad?
Yeah, that's fantastic work, Jay. I really appreciate it, man.
Hey, thanks for reaching out. Thanks for being a viewer. Like I said, I kind of just do this as a side gig for fun, and I love hearing, like, you have some incredible lines in some of your drafts, man. So it's truly a pleasure.
Yeah, of course. I'm gonna keep plugging away at it, and yeah, thanks again.